Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Kamish Orr. Today we're going to give an update on the Best of the Decades tournament, the 1930s, using season ticket baseball. We are down to the final four teams, two American League and two National League teams. And I wanted to give a little update on that and how we got here. Well, first of all, in the last round, the Philadelphia Athletics beat the Washington Senators, or Washington Nationals, 3-1, which knocked Washington down to the losers bracket, where they would get a rematch with the 1939 New York Yankees. The Yankees had swept the 1935 Tigers in the losers bracket after getting swept by Washington earlier, so this was their chance at redemption, and they got that redemption in Game 1 when Red Ruffing shut out Washington through a 5-hitter, and New York took Game 1 3-0. General Crowder pitching for Washington in this one, and Yankees wouldn't get their first run until the 6th inning on a Joe DiMaggio home run, solo homer, and they'd score 3 runs in this one to take Game 1 of the series. But in Game 2, it was back to Washington. New York had their chances early. They scored 4 runs in the 2nd and 3rd inning there to take a 4-3 lead through 3 innings. But Washington scored 3 more runs in the 5th. Joe Cronin had a 2-run shot there in the 5th inning, and Dave Harris had an RBI single to put them up 6-4. Now, New York would get another run back in the bottom of the 5th when Charlie Keller had his second home run of the game. Keller finished this one 5 for 5 with 5 RBI, actually. But it wouldn't be enough, as that was as close as New York could get. And Washington just kept scoring, first against Lefty Gomez, and then against Marius Russo, I believe. I think it's Marius Russo. Dave Harris had a 2-run shot there in the 9th inning to just put more icing on the cake, as Washington took Game 2 11-7. To even the series. In Game 3, another heartbreaking loss for New York, as Atlee Donald on the mound for the Yankees allowed a couple runs there in the 4th inning. Fred Schulte had a 2-run double for the first 2 runs of the game. They would add another run in the 5th when Goose Goslin had an RBI single. And New York was facing a 3-0 deficit. Monty Weaver was holding the Yankees in check until the 8th inning, when they finally managed to get the bases loaded. But unfortunately, a couple of groundouts would lead to a couple of runs to get to close that gap to 3-2. But that's as close as they would get, as Jack Russell pitched a perfect 9th for his 4th save and gave Washington a 2-1 series lead. So the Yankees came into Game 4 facing elimination. It's a double elimination tournament, so they were facing complete elimination from the tournament. And that happened in heartbreaking fashion here in Game 4. Once again, the Yankees took an early lead. Joe DiMaggio had a 2-run double there in the 3rd. Charlie Keller scored him on a single, following that with a single. But Joe Cronin had a 3-run homer to tie things up 3-3 after 3 innings. But the Yankees came back and scored another run in the 4th. And they took that 4-3 lead into the bottom of the 9th when Hadley actually walked Schulte, allowed a double to Kuehl, and then put Cliff Bolton on intentionally to load the bases and give them a shot to prevent the Washington comeback. Now, Ozzie Bluidge grounded out in that next at bat, but that ended up tying the game. And Luke Sewell actually hit an RBI single to win it for Washington and walk this one off in dramatic fashion for Washington. So New York got eliminated here. Meanwhile, over in the National League, after the Cubs topped the Cardinals in 5 games. They lost the first 2 of the series and then won the next 3. And the Giants, 34 Giants, topped the 39 Reds 3 games to 1. We had a matchup between the Cardinals and the Giants. The Cardinals had already faced the Giants once and beat them 3 games to 2. The series went a full 5 games. And in this one, in the very first game of the series, the Cardinals once again came out on top. They scored 2 runs in the first inning. Giants responded with a run of their own in the third. But then St. Louis put up 5 runs in the 5th against Syl Johnson. They basically batted around in the 5th inning. And, Schumacher was pitching for the Giants. Had the complete game in this one. And they basically batted around there in the 5th to put them up 7-1. And New York would score a couple runs there over the final 3 innings to pull to within a couple of runs, but they would just come up short and lose this one 7-5. Schumacher ended up staying in the whole game, a full 8 innings, but he's on the losing side of this one as St. Louis took Game 1 of the series. Game 2 was a close one. Once again, the Cardinals started out on top with 3 runs in the first. Chick Hafey hit a 2-run homer. That was his 4th home run of the tournament. And that lead would carry on. They'd score another run in the 6th and 2 more in the 7th to give them a 6-1 lead after 7 innings. Now, New York would come back in the 8th and score 4, batting around in the 8th against Paul Derringer. And St. Louis would actually have to bring in Lindsey to try to stop the damage there. And they would keep a 1-run lead into the 9th inning, and that's where things would stand here. So Hubble with another loss. He's only 2-2, despite a decent ERA of 3.51. Derringer improves to 2-0. His ERA is 3.31. And so the Cardinals take Game 2 of the series. So the Giants facing elimination and facing a sweep. And that's exactly what would happen here as the St. Louis offense kept rolling, this time against Fitzsimmons, who only lasted 3 innings in this one, allowing 9 hits and 7 runs. Only 3 of those runs were earned, thanks to a couple of key errors, actually, in this one. Travis Jackson's error being the main one here in the 2nd inning that would lead to those 4 unearned runs. Now, St. Louis would score another run in the 3rd, 2 in the 4th, another run in the 5th. And New York would fight back again late in the game, but come up just short and lose this one 8-5 to get swept by the Cardinals. So, we have a rematch. The final 4 teams we have in the American League, we have the Philadelphia Athletics. The 1931 Philadelphia Athletics face the 1933 Washington Nationals or Senators. And in the National League, we had the 1935 Cubs facing the 1931 Cardinals. Again, both these teams had faced off against one another. And we were expecting some interesting series here, and that's just what we got. As in Game 1, Washington and Philadelphia were tied through 9 innings, 0-0. That carried on into the 10th when Lefty Grove finally allowed a couple of runs there in the 10th as Washington scores 3 runs in the 10th. Jack Russell came in to close things out, and things got really interesting as Max Bishop led off with a single. Mule Haas followed that with a flyout, but then Mickey Cochran homered to make it a 3-2 ball game. Jimmy Moore came in for an injured Al Simmons earlier in the game, grounded out for the 2nd out. But then Jimmy Fox followed that with a double. So with a tying run there in scoring position, Bing Miller flew out to end the game. So this one 3-2 win for Washington. as they get some revenge against Philadelphia. However, in the next game, we had another close one, as once again Washington out in front early, 3-0 there in the first inning against Rube Wahlberg, who just didn't have a great start, only lasted 4 1/3 innings, allowed 6 runs on 11 hits, and this one looked like it might be a blowout. However, Philadelphia hung in there. Jimmy Fox had a 2-run homer in the second. Mickey Cochran added a 2-run homer in the fifth to make it 6-4. And then in the sixth, General Crowder kind of lost it after getting Jimmy Dykes and Dib Williams to ground out. He walked the next 3 batters, and then Mule Haas followed that with a bases-clearing triple, a 3-run triple that put Philadelphia in the lead 7-6. Now that would carry on until the 9th inning, when Washington would actually score thanks to an error on Jimmy Fox to tie the game. So once again, we went into extra innings, this time 7-7 into the 10th. Eddie Rommel had a perfect 10th inning, 1-2-3 inning. And in the bottom of the 10th, Alex McCall was still in to face Philadelphia. He walked leadoff hitter Jimmy Dykes for the inning, leadoff for the inning at least. Dib Williams followed with a single, and then got Eric McNair to pop one out to the catcher. Followed that with a ground out by Max Bishop. And with runners on the corners, Lou Finney, who was in for an injured Al Simmons, singled home the winning run, hit one in the gap to win this one for Philadelphia and tie the series at a game apiece. Over in Chicago, the Cubs came out on top in this one. There was an unearned run there in the first, so St. Louis was the first team to score, but Chicago would get that one right back when Chuck Klein doubled in Augie Galan, and that 1-1 score would last until the 7th inning, when the Cubs would put another couple RBI on the board. Galan would hit an RBI double, and Billy Herman would follow with an RBI single to give them a 3-1 lead. They'd add an insurance run in the 8th, and St. Louis never really threatened in this one, as Bill Lee, through 8 innings, allowed just 2 hits. He did walk 5, but just 2 hits, and that unearned run in the first was all Chicago would get in this one. Or excuse me, St. Louis would get in this one, as Chicago tops them 4-1 in Game 1. Game 2, another close game. This time Hallahan facing Warnecki, excuse me. And Chicago would get out on top first in this one, scoring a run in the second and run in the third. Another unearned run, by the way, in the second. However, St. Louis would respond with a couple of runs of their own to tie things up. Chick Hafey once again with 2-run single there in the 4th to tie things up. Cubs would retake the lead in the 5th with another unearned run. But St. Louis would come right back in the 6th to tie things up when Hafey homered a solo shot, tying the game at 3. Now, Chicago would score again in the bottom of the 6th to take the lead, but St. Louis would respond once again in the 7th. This time, Frankie Frisch's RBI double would tie things back up. And then in the 8th, finally, Charlie Gilbert hit a sac fly to score the go-ahead run for St. Louis, and they took this one 5-4 in a game that went back and forth pretty much the entire game. So that series also tied up at a game apiece. Now, if we look at the bracket itself, we see the final 4 teams here. All of these series a game apiece. Now, because Washington and St. Louis are coming out of the losers bracket and Philadelphia and Chicago have not lost a series yet, Washington and St. Louis will have to beat Philadelphia and Chicago respectively in a 5-game series, and then also in a 7-game series, if it should go to that, to advance to the finals of the tournament. So one of these 4 teams is going to be the champion of the 1930s best of the 1930s tournament. It's just a matter of waiting to see which one it is. If we go over here to the standings, of course, the standings themselves are irrelevant, but we can get an idea of who the hot hitting and pitching teams are. And we see that the Philadelphia Athletics are leading the entire American League in the tournament with a .324 batting average. Just crazy. Washington hitting .263, but the ERA is Washington's much better with a .402 compared to .456 for Philadelphia. We look down here into runs scored and all of that fun stuff. We can see that Philadelphia scored 68 runs. Washington scored 77, so Washington's still scoring a lot of runs. They're outwalking everybody, 61 walks compared to 48 for Philadelphia, which leads to, one would think, with all those walks, they would be leading, but because of that much higher batting average for Philadelphia, their on base is actually higher and their slugging's higher. So they're better at batting average, on base percentage, and slugging than Washington is. So they're in prime position here to top them here and take the American League Championship. Meanwhile, in the National League, we have a much closer matchup here between Chicago and St. Louis. Chicago hitting .305 to St. Louis's .298. The difference being Chicago's pitching staff is a little bit better, .401 ERA compared to .440 for St. Louis. And that's the main difference here between those two teams. Now, if we take a look at the leaderboard, if anybody's curious to see the batting leaders, Al Simmons is hitting .535 this tournament, which is just insane. And in fact, the only other player, the number 2 player that's still in the tournament is Mule Haas, and he's hitting .431. Then you get a Chicago Cubs batter. There's several players hitting over 400 here in this tournament. Al Simmons is second in slugging of those that are in first and those that are left, and first in on base, of course, too. However, Chick Hafey has hit 5 homers so far in the tournament, and he leads all the players that are left in the tournament. Leads in RBI as well with 16, and in runs scored with 13. So he's just been an offensive machine for St. Louis. And if we take a quick look at the pitching leaders, of course, most of these pitchers, even the starters, haven't pitched more than a handful of games. So it's kind of hard to draw any conclusions yet. But Earl Whitehill here has won 4 games for Washington. Bill Lee has won 3 games for Chicago. Jack Russell has had 5 saves. Of course, back in the 30s, there weren't nearly as many saves. Many more complete games out there. But it's been an interesting series so far as we head back to take a look at the tournament again here. We see what we're faced with here. I have another project going with Payoff Pitch with a Hall of Fame league. And so I'm playing that this week, but next week I'll be playing the next 4 games of the tournament here. So there's a chance there that at least one of these series will be over by then, if not both, if a team can win 2 more. But of course, if it's Washington or St. Louis, they'll have to win another 7-game series, actually, in order to actually advance to the finals, to the championship. In any event, just wanted to give you a quick update of where we're at with the tournament. Hopefully you find that interesting. Head over to baseballmaelstrom.com where you can follow all of the action. And just click this Best of the 30s tournament link. And if you click that, that'll take you to the page where you get a little write-up on every game. And you can see the tournament here if you're curious about that. So, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have a great evening.